Greetings, and I hope you're having a good day. And today I want to start off with the first lecture on German institutions. And as you read through Roskin and you look through these lecture notes on German institutions, I want you to think about a couple of things. It appears if Germany were a child, their political system were a child, it would be a child of two very different looking parents. In some ways, German political institutions look somewhat like the United States. Uh, there is a very strong constitutional court, a Supreme Court in Germany that resembles the United States Supreme Court. This is almost unheard of in Europe and is very rare around the world. Usually, there is not a strong Supreme Court. And so, in both the United States and in Germany, you may have the two strongest national Supreme Courts in the world. So, that's one way that Germany looks like the United States. Another way that Germany looks like the United States is in the arena of German federalism. And your notes start here. But in many ways, Germany is even more federal than the United States. Once again, very different than our first two countries. When I talked about Britain and France were unitary states. Britain and France did not have a constitutional court with the power to strike down laws as unconstitutional. Both courts very, very weak. So in that way, Germany looks like the United States, federalism, strong Supreme Court. But the other parent, and probably the parent that Germany resembles the most, is Britain. Germany is a parliamentary system like Great Britain, so their chancellor, that's what they call their prime minister, resembles the British prime minister. The chancellor is elected by the legislature, so the Bundestag elects the German chancellor, just as the House of Commons elects the British prime minister. There are some differences, however. Germany has always had a coalition government, and coalition governments are rare in Britain. When we talk about votes of no confidence, the votes of no confidence are different. The Germans require a constructive vote of no confidence, and I'll talk about that later. You can't just vote a chancellor or prime minister out of office in Germany. You have to have a replacement elected in simultaneously. So that looks very, very different. German chancellors also serve a much longer tenure than do British prime ministers. We have had three German chancellors since World War II that have served 14 years or more. There has never, in the last 100 years, been a British prime minister that has served for 14 years or more consecutively, like in the German case. So when I talk about German institutions, you're going to hear a lot of similarities to both the United States and to Britain. And of course, there are unique differences in the German political system that I will get into as well. So let's start with German federalism. You should know that Germany is currently comprised of 16 states. The states in Germany are called Land or Landers. You should know for exam purposes that German states are more powerful. They are much more financially independent than American states. And we're seeing the weakness of American states right now with this coronavirus pandemic. American states are really worried about their finances. They don't have the means to backfill the revenue that they're losing. And you can see that the states are reaching out to the national government to try to make them whole, or at least to make them more solvent. This is not true in the German case. The German states are more independent because they have a constitutionally guaranteed share of tax revenues, which the United States does not. And I will talk a bit more about that in just a little bit. Well, heck, I'll do it right now. So the United States are dependent on the national government for over $750 billion a year, which makes them very vulnerable to pressure. One of the examples that I use in my American government course is that the U.S. government wanted the states to impose a DUI standard of at least 0.10. The state of Louisiana did not want to do this for a variety of reasons. They actually told the national government that you can't do this, that this is a state power. The national government agreed that it was a state power and said, we're not telling you you have to do this, but if you don't, we're going to take away a certain share of your health care funding and you can backfill it. And of course, when you are dependent on the national government for $750 billion a year, they have a lot of leverage over you. The German national government does not have that kind of leverage over the German states because they are much more financially independent. The second point is that Roskin makes it seem that German federalism is merely a reaction to the highly centralized Nazi regime. And there's no question that there is some truth to it. There is no question that there are a variety of things in the German Constitution that are a reaction to the Nazi regime. For example, the first 17 articles of the German Constitution deal with civil liberties and civil rights, which are a reaction to the abuses of the civil liberties and civil rights during the reign of Adolf Hitler. So there are multiple things, and I would agree that German federalism is one of them. But I actually believe that the strongest reason for German federalism is this is what makes sense given German history. There is a very lengthy and a very strong sense of regional identity in Germany. Keep in mind, at one time, what today is Germany was nearly 1,800 different political entities. There are very strong regional differences between the German states of the North and the South based on religion. There are very strong differences between the states of the East and West based on political ideology and based on the end of World War II. German regionalism, and I wish Roskin had talked about this more, German regionalism was so strong that they had 4 decades of confederation. Yes, we had a brief period of confederation. Notice another parallel between the United States and Germany. One thing that I just found interesting personally, it's not important for test purposes, but when federalism was being discussed in terms of being placed in the German Constitution, it is intriguing that the only German political party that opposed federalism were the communists. And so the communists wanted a strong unitary state, which makes sense given their ideology, but they were outvoted. Like in Britain, here's another parallel to Britain. The Germans have a separation between their chief of state and their chief executive. Remember, in Britain, the chief executive was Queen Elizabeth. It was a lifetime monarch. Britain has a constitutional monarchy, and of course, Queen Elizabeth is now, I believe, in her 67th year as the Queen of England. In Germany, there is also a ceremonial leader. It is not a monarch. It is not someone who's there for a lifetime, but it is a ceremonial role that often goes to former distinguished politicians or public officials. And so when I ask you on the exam, the chief or head of state in Germany is the president. So this is typical in parliamentary systems. There's typically is a separation between the symbolic chief or head of state and the chief executive, who is the political leader of the country. So in Germany, it is the president who performs these ceremonial tasks. It is the president who symbolizes national unity. Again, this is a person who is indirectly elected by the Bundestag and by the states. In your notes, I have written the Lander, by a secret ballot without debate. Usually the choice is supported by all or most of the parties. Your book has the wrong president. Since your textbook was published, there has been a new president. So the current president of Germany is Frank-Walter Steinmeier. Mr. Steinmeier was elected in March of 2017. The president serves a 5-year term and may be, and often is, reelected once. The previous two presidents both had minor scandals that tarnished the image of the party a little bit, but of presidents a little bit. But Steinmeier, I looked to see if there's been any scandal, any rumor, any innuendo, and it appears that he has served his duties without any kind of negative connotations, which tells me, and I don't know this, that he's likely to be reelected in 2022 unless something happens. Now, the real power in the German political system, just like the real power in the British system, is in their prime minister. In Germany, the prime minister is called the chancellor. Just like the British prime minister, the German chancellor is the chief executive. And they do have many of the similar roles. But there are some significant differences that I pointed out in the notes. And one of them that I mentioned earlier is the German chancellor has far greater job security, far greater tenure. I gave you some statistics in your notes, and I want you to just think about this one. Since 1949, so that is a long time, that is nearly 3/4 of a century. In the nearly 3/4 of a century of the current political system in Germany, there have only been 8 chancellors. Now compare that to Great Britain. During that same period of time, since 1949, there have been 16 British prime ministers. So on paper, it would appear it should be the opposite. And the reason is German chancellors, their term of office is only 4 years. Remember, the British prime minister serves a 5-year term. So you would think there would be greater job security in being British prime minister, but it's not true. There have been 13 U.S. presidents since 1949, and there have even been 8 French presidents since 1959. And in your notes, I talk about this tendency of the Germans to stay with their chancellor if they think their chancellor is doing a good job. And so I listed the 3 chancellors who have served 14 years or more. Konrad Adenauer, who was the first German chancellor, served 14 years from 1949 to 1963. Helmut Kohl served from 1982 to 1998, 16 years. And the current chancellor, Angela Merkel, has served as chancellor for 15 years. She was first elected in 2005. She is in her 15th year. She has not made a decision yet whether she will seek another term in office, a 5th term in office. But all of the betting money is that if she decides to run, she would win a 5th term. In Britain, no prime minister has served 3 consecutive terms of office in the post-World War II period. Both Margaret Thatcher and Tony Blair were forced from office. When we had an American president, Franklin Roosevelt, elected for 4 terms, we changed our Constitution so that a president can only serve 2 terms. In France, we had one president serve 14 years, Francois Mitterrand, but his successor had the Constitution changed to where a French president now realistically can probably only serve